Good morning, Kansas City. This is Patrick Tuohey, Kansas City's second favorite Patrick, sitting in for Pete Mundo on the Pete Mundo Show on KCMO Talk Radio. I am here all morning until 10 a.m. when I hand off to Kevin Keatsman for all the misdis and malinformation you can't get enough of. This segment, I've got one of my colleagues from the Show Me Institute with me, Elias Tsapelas. Elias is super smart when it comes to numbers and budgets, and he's great to work with because I sometimes just treat him as my human AI or Google search engine because he knows more off the top of his head and can get it to me quicker than it would take me to search itself online. Elias, good morning. We talked earlier about the effort in Missouri to reduce the income tax. The legislature has put something on the ballot. If you were explaining this to a fourth grader who didn't know anything about what was going on in Missouri, how might you describe it?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I think the first thing I would bring up is that kind of just a recognition of where Missouri's standing today. You know, Missouri is one of the most reliant states in the country on the income tax, and our state is just not doing very well. We're in the bottom half. We're about 30th in economic growth. We're 34th in population growth. And states across the country are realizing tax policy changes where people, families, businesses live, and they're making changes there. And what economics shows you, research for decades, is that getting away from the income tax is one of the best ways you can help that. And so the legislature is working on how to shift the state from this harmful tax to something that's going to be more economically efficient, like sales taxes or focusing on consumption.
Do we have a sense of the degree to which the income tax plays a role in people either moving out or not moving here in the first place? I know there are hundreds of reasons why people choose to move, but income tax is not a zero, but what do we know?
Well, what you can look at is basically saying, if you tax something generally, you're going to get less of it. So what does taxing income do that's taxing work, that's taxing investment? It's taxing all these things you want in an economy, in a thriving state. And so whenever you look across the country and see which states are doing the best, which states are doing worse, you see that the states that have lower or no income taxes are doing better. And one of the clearest signs that we can look at is the IRS puts out data every year of where people are living and their incomes and everything like that. And people are moving out of higher income tax states like California, like New York, and to another extent, Missouri, and moving to these lower tax places. So Missouri is losing hundreds of millions of dollars to states like Tennessee all the time.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Tennessee because a lot of times when I hear the argument you've just put forward, people say, well, they're moving to Texas, they're moving to Florida. Well, climate is not something that a legislature can address or, being next to the ocean. But Tennessee is much more comparable to Missouri. I think population-wise, they're the same. They certainly have two big cities that drive their state engine. And if we're losing population to Tennessee, or rather, if Tennessee is outstripping us in population growth, I mean, that's a real lesson, whereas maybe it's unfair to compare ourselves to Florida. Although now that I say that, California has oceans. California is perhaps the most beautiful state in the country. San Diego, I mean, man, if I could live anywhere in the world, I would move to San Diego in a heartbeat. And yet California is seeing a drain, not because of its resources, but because of its financial climate. So maybe Tennessee is the exact right example. When Tennessee, well, tell me about Tennessee. When they got rid of their income tax, how did they do it? And are there any lessons we can learn from what Tennessee did, maybe the mistakes they made?
Well, Tennessee has never been as reliant on the income tax as Missouri has. So Missouri is one of the most reliant in the country on the income tax, or specifically taxing wages. So Tennessee used to tax more like a capital gains type thing, and they got rid of that. But I think the most instructive piece here is, well, two things. First is that Missouri used to be bigger than Tennessee. So Missouri used to be 50 years ago, Missouri had more people, had a better economy, all these type of things. And that is no longer the case. It's not even close anymore. And a big reason for that, I think, is just looking at the tax climate and how these states have been handling themselves. And when you look at Missouri right now, especially across the country, states all over the place are trying to improve their tax climate. And because it's recognizing it's really important, especially now where workers, families can live anywhere and work, remotely. So you need to make your tax climate as desirable as possible. And states all around Missouri are lowering their income taxes. So even a decade ago, states like Iowa had higher income taxes than Missouri. Arkansas had higher income taxes. And Kentucky was significantly worse. And now they're all lower. They're moving further in that direction. And if Missouri doesn't keep up or go faster, we're going to stay in this economic rut that we've created for ourselves.
Why did states at a time rely more on the income tax? It made sense. Is it a matter of it made sense back then and it doesn't make sense now that the economy has changed, but our revenue generation hasn't? How do you explain that?
Well, a lot of states shifted more towards the income tax. I think it was around 40-ish years ago, 50 years ago. And I think at the time they didn't realize how economically harmful it would be. It was at a time that people were worried about rising prices on consumption, so sales taxes, but also the cost of government, and what it was doing was becoming more expensive. And so it was saying, this is going to be an easier source of revenue to look at. But now we have decades of looking at it, and states are figuring out, hey, this isn't actually the best way to do this. We're disincentivizing a lot of these wrong things, and frankly, giving people more money as opposed to, the government taking it before you get your check, and letting people spend their money, where they want, live where they want, businesses locate where they want. It's leading to better economic outcomes. And, I think just as the economy changes, as everything changes, states' tax systems should be changing as well. And that's what I think Missouri's legislature is trying to do.
A lot of the opponents of this, or maybe even people who are just learning about this issue, are understandably concerned about anytime you make a big change, what are the implications going to be? We talked about the Beacon publishing a story about what are the concerns in Kansas City to how they're going to change their tax structure. And you and I, if I may say, have spent years at the Show Me Institute being disappointed by our state legislature. What are the things that were, if this passes and if the state sets itself on a path to reduce our income tax to zero, what are the next steps? What are the things that they need to do to make sure that the state is able to do this? And are there states that have tried this and have made horrible mistakes that we can learn from? I just want to make sure, like let's give some weight to the concerns of people who are hesitant to accept this. And how would you tell them, your concerns are valid, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't move forward, I guess. Sorry, that's several questions in one. Forgive me.
Well, I think the first thing that, I like to address is when a lot of people talk about this thing, they talk about, just how high the state's sales tax would have to, go up. I think the Beacon article talked about, saying, hey, if Missouri wants to get rid of this is going to cause all these problems. You're going to have to raise the sales tax rate over 6%, something well over 10. We're going to have to tax more than $300 million more consumption, all these very worrisome numbers. And I guess, it's more relevant in the Kansas City area, the concern of, are we going down the same path of Kansas, something like that. But I think the most important thing to recognize of what the legislature is putting forward here is that this is a much more measured and thought out plan than something like that. This is going to be something very gradual. So it's basically saying the legislature would put the state on the path to get rid of the income tax, lowering the rate as revenue growth comes in. So this is not something that would happen immediately. Now, the legislature hasn't said how fast we'd get rid of it, but this is something that Missouri's been doing for over a decade now, where we've lowered our top rate from 6% to 4.7%. And, the Missouri has not gone bankrupt in this period. As you wait to have the money before you lower the income tax rate, Missouri's revenue collections are over 50% higher than they were when we started lowering the income tax. And so the concerns of raising the rate, that's something that if you get rid of the income tax over time, you don't need to raise the sales tax rate near as much or at all. And that's not even something that's on the table right now. And when people start talking about, oh, you're going to have to expand the sales tax to cover $300 million more in consumption, well, Missouri's consumption has increased over $100 million in just the last 7 years.
Yeah.
So this is something that if you're looking out over another decade, this is something that, this is really not going to be something that is near severe. I think a lot of people are scaring people for, reasons that don't necessarily make sense, or, it's far too early to be getting worried about these things. And I think just remembering that, hey, Kansas already has a higher state sales tax than Missouri. Missouri's sales tax system is very messed up in a ton of different ways. And the state's economy is just not doing well and moving in a direction that is going to make things look better. That's what all the economic research says. And doing it in a smart way, slowly but surely, is not something to worry about. It's something really that I think, more people should be more excited about.
Well, obviously I agree with you, Elias, and thank you so much for coming on. I think you make an important point. You've got to start by telling people, look, right now, Missouri isn't doing so well. We're not growing as fast as our neighbors. Listeners will remember that we lost a congressional seat years ago because our population wasn't keeping up with around the country, and that staying where we are is not sustainable because we are losing more and more. We need to clean up our tax code and we need to get it right. Elias, thank you so much for your time. I will talk to you again soon, I'm sure. It occurs to me reading that Beacon piece, Wes Rogers is a member of the Kansas City Council, is a hand-wringing about, sales taxes will go up. Good Lord. I live in southern Kansas City in Waldo. Sales taxes around my neighborhood are already over 10 because you get a CID, you get a TDD, you get this tax rate. If these guys are seriously worried about sales taxes, the time for them to get active was years ago. Kansas City needs to clean up our messy tax system. We need to stop issuing people all these subsidies, and we need to fix and make ourselves competitive here. But pointing the finger at Jeff City and say, you're going to ruin things for us when things are pretty bad here, thanks to folks at City Hall, is an outrageous thing to say.